So the thing that's in my face right now that I find really obnoxious is that Blue Origin thing. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh.
Yeah, you are not in, you're not on social media now. I'm sexy and look at my boobs and all that stuff that you see that I saw for a trip to outer space, or almost outer space. They glammed up. Does it control you? Does that glam life control you now?
Welcome to It's Interesting You Say That, a Bounce Back Generation podcast.
You know, Jeff Bezos has this penis-shaped rocket. I'm not just like saying it's, I think they planned it that way. And they did that thing where you go up into the tip of the stratosphere. They go up and then they float around for 4 minutes and they come back down.
Gayle revealed in a post-flight interview that the pop superstar made good on her promise and belted the Louis Armstrong classic What a Wonderful World. The Taking Up Space crew also included Bezos' fiancée, journalist Lauren Sanchez, rocket scientist Aisha Bowe, astronaut and civil rights activist Amanda Wynn, and film producer Carrie Ann Flynn.
Gayle King went up there and came down, and people started criticizing, like, the world is freaking, on fire, and you guys are spending, it's very expensive. Gayle King is getting criticized for it, and she starts defending the whole thing, saying, we are astronauts. Like the insult to call it. But here's the other thing is they all wore like these really kind of sexy suits, and it was like unzipped and they had the bosoms and the whole thing. And then they come back down and Katy Perry and I think somebody else went and kissed the ground like, oh, I love Earth. And then Katy Perry said something really annoying like, you don't know what love is until you go up into the stratosphere or some bullshit like that. Like, oh God, this is the whole thing. So they had just been trashed on social media. So I thought this is a really good, what struck me about it is, first of all, the fact that the Glam Squad, which is Lauren Sanchez, the girlfriend of Jeff Bezos, the one he left his cool wife for, right? Then there's Gayle King, who I don't mind Gayle King, but you're not a freaking astronaut, Gayle King. And then Katy Perry, who's the most annoying of all. And then there's this woman, what's her name? Carrie Ann Flynn. Apparently is super, super wealthy because she went up there with a $350,000 watch on her arm. So, and obviously she has money to, purchase the trip. And then there are some legit astronauts who nobody knows their names. And so I looked them up. So there was Aisha Bowe, a former NASA rocket scientist, entrepreneur, and STEM advocate. Amanda Nguyen, a bioastronautics research scientist and activist. So two legit, actual science ladies, women. And then, Gayle King, a co-host of CBS Morning, and a journalist, Katy Perry, a pop music artist, Carrie Ann Flynn, the one with the expensive watch, a film producer and community builder, and then Lauren Sanchez, a journalist, author, and pilot engaged to Blue Origin founder Jeff Bezos. So that's the scenario. And I thought this is about female power that we don't talk about. Something about female power that's really annoying.
Well, what does that say to you about female power?
There are women who get their power from the outside, the glam stuff, like you're sexy, sexy, sexy. And I have it's the housewives kind of vibe. I got the right clothes and I have the Birkin bag and I got the Botox and the, all of that stuff that gets done. And I feel like it diminishes women's power. And it's like, I actually find that glam look more powerful when a trans person does it. Like, it feels more authentic when a trans man, like a RuPaul, that feels super powerful and cool and interesting to me. But when women do it, it feels very disempowering to me personally.
I hope they don't, crucify me in the comments for whatever I say during this podcast. But I don't know. I'm kind of in the camp of, the more effortless it looks, the more, at least in kind of the terms of glam and attractiveness, the more attractive I typically find it. Because if you're a beautiful or attractive woman, whether that's because of your looks or your personality or whatever it is, well, I find the fact that you don't have to overcompensate maybe to be attractive, because I feel like if you're if I can see you overcompensating, I know you're overcompensating. So then my mind immediately just goes to, okay, what are you overcompensating for? And basically, we were kind of talking about the same thing for men. It's money, it's fame, it's status. And now, the first thing in this one, talking about women's power, it's, basically what they're wearing and how they look.
We've talked a little bit about this, that these traditional roles that we've assigned to women and to men, they come from very basic, somewhere in our brain here that developed a long time ago. They are not necessarily effective today, and they become distorted. As we've talked about, male distorted power, there's female distorted power as well. These are helped along by social norms that are not really well thought through. They're just like, these kind of, instinctual urges that we all have to, ooh, look at that, and that if we were to take some of these archetypes that we've talked about, and we allow people to adopt archetypal energies, whether they are male or female, I think it allows more freedom to discover who you are and to express your gender role, and you're just yourself, your own personality in your own way. So there's a really great story called The Red Shoes. I think this really kind of encapsulates what's happening right now with women power. So there's a story about this orphan girl, and she doesn't have any shoes. She's very, very poor. So she goes out and she just finds all these materials, and she puts them together, and she makes her own shoes. And then a rich woman finds her and adopts her, and gives her new shoes. But these new shoes that she gives her are very prim, and they really are about female innocence, and you're not supposed to look at me, and you can't look at me sexually, and things like that. And so the girl grows up with those kind of very strict kind of religious boundaries on her, and she rejects them, and she ends up going and buying some factory made bright red shoes. And she loves them at first. They're very glamorous and beautiful, and everybody looks at her, and she goes and she dances in these red shoes. And she's a fantastic dancer, and she gets a lot of attention and all of that. And then the shoes won't stop dancing. They keep dancing, and it nearly kills her because these shoes keep dancing. And what that story is about is that you can buy into the glamour, beauty, let me go get Botox and, make my lips bigger and do all that kind of stuff and wear the right clothes and have the right purse and high heel shoes and I'm sexy and look at my boobs and all that stuff that you see that I saw for a trip to outer space, or, almost outer space. They did that. They glammed up like that, big hair and the makeup and everything. And it's like what does that do to you? Does it control you? Does that glam life control you now? And that's really what this story is about. And I think there's probably, stories like that about men too, where you can, pursue I think we see it all the time, the pursuit to be the good provider, to be the strong man. And look at, we're watching how it goes astray in our politics, all these men. There are men that are going down to El Salvador, congressmen, just to take a picture in front of people in jail behind them like this. Like, how sick is that? Right? So there's abuse of this kind of thing going back and forth, and so my request, I don't know, my call, my desire would be that we share these kinds of stories so that we can see behind our own behaviors, and we teach kids that, and then we say it's okay to be glamorous if that's the true, authentic you, but don't let it own you. And it's okay to be a strong man who provides and, has power and can, tell people what to do, because we do need good leaders. We need people like that. But women can be that way, and men can be glamorous, and, all more power to them. I was remembering this morning just really quickly about this. When I lived in Africa, and my dad worked in in for USAID. We lived in Mauritania, and went there when I was in my teens. And I remember women kind of, as soon as I landed on the plane, practically, because my dad, he was a single dad. My parents are divorced, so I came to visit my dad. There's no mother figure there. All these women kind of came around me, and like very protective, and I thought, oh, they're so nice. They're trying to help me, acclimate to living in Mauritania, whatever. Well, it turned out, I didn't realize this until years later. There was a man there who was Mauritanian, the most handsome man I think I've ever seen in my whole life. Uh, he, of course, is African, but he had like the green eyes and just like perfectly chiseled jaw, the whole thing. And he had like a fling with one of the teenage daughters of one of the people who lived there. But he was like the epitome. He kind of reminded me of like that guy. I don't know if you know about the guy who had a mugshot and people saw the mugshot and he ended up like with some rich billionaire's, daughter or something. That kind of beauty. So men can have that kind of like, stuck beauty that like lightning bolts through you. You're like, oh my God, nothing wrong with that. I mean, he probably shouldn't have been with, hanging out with teenagers, but the teenage white girl too, so that's why they're all like, ooh, 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 protect the daughters or whatever. Anyway, so just an example.
The archetypes. You know, thinking of it from that perspective, maybe the male and female gender is better looked at through the lens of their archetypes. You can subscribe, you cannot, but they are there, and they are with at some level probably within your biology. And once you're conscious of them, maybe you can kind of discard or take what you want and what you don't want. But I think we might have had a conversation about marketing and kind of how they use, like, fear is probably one of the best ways to market, because people see, oh, you're going to miss out, oh, you're not going to have this, oh, you won't be successful. Okay, like I'll spend my money to do that. And it's just a biological thing. It's not really logical. It's just within us. And so marketers know at some mass scale, if you reach out to 1 million people and use this specific sort of marketing, you're going to get a lot more people that buy, because it's within their wiring. And I think we kind of do, men and women kind of do that too, with the beauty or the money, the whatever it is. And when we kind of look at it logically, and no, it doesn't really make sense, because really, like, if you're the most beautiful woman on the planet, traditionally, like, you would still only marry one guy. And
Right.
and so once you kind of hit that milestone, once you get married, or once you fulfill that role, or for a man, once you have a couple of kids, okay, well, it's probably time to dial it back, because now you're not, biologically in the state of procuring. You're not seeking anymore. You've obtained it, and now it's like, okay, let me nurture this. And I think for men, where that goes wrong is you chase the money so much, or you chase I guess this is a really common story, but you chase the job so much, or you chase the money so much, you chase whatever so much, that you end up losing your family. Or that,
Yes.
or the hero in the movie will get so wrapped up in his own powers that he actually hurts the people that he's trying to protect.
Chi pensava, mamma? Entro io. Entro. È sicura di essere forte. Sicura i due per la famiglia. Potessi mica di far di forte la famiglia. Mica di veduta.
Right.
And I think for women, the kind of flip side of that is, like, I'm trying to look so beautiful, I'm trying to be this great dancer, get all this attention, so much that it starts to deteriorate at your beauty, or it starts to deteriorate at your capacity to nurture children, let's say, or be compassionate. And, yes, traditional, yes, archetypal, but I think that is the downside. You want your face to look so nice, so you use all, the Botox or the makeup, and you realize, like, well, actually, long term, this probably isn't that good for your skin. And so you kind of want the short term benefits of the beauty. And
Yeah.
I think that's what, well, for me, I think that's why when I see, not so much anymore, because I'm not on, I'm not looking, but when I was, on the market and I was looking for someone that I thought was attractive, I did want to see the natural beauty come through. Because if you're covering it all up, then, well, one, I don't actually know what you look like.
Right.
And I know that sounds kind of messed up, and I know women put a lot of time into the way, or some women put a lot of time into that. I think as this man, I won't say for all men, but I think I think a decent amount of men, we want to see how you actually look, and you have all that makeup on, we can't actually see. And if you're doing all this stuff for attention, well, then how can I see who you actually are, and if you're actually going to be a decent long-term partner? And maybe it's the same for women. I don't know. It's probably in a different way, but it's a little strange to. It is a little strange. Again, kind of what you said about, it's 2025 and we're still kind of doing these things. It kind of comes back to those root biologies that aren't really serving us anymore.
Right.
We're in a completely different space and time than we were when those systems were created. And I think especially this last 50 years, and then especially this last 5 years, things have just sped up so much. We're nowhere near where we were. And the
Yeah.
systems that we have are really failing us. And I think there are people that take advantage of that, knowing that there are these fundamental, maybe human operating systems that, hey, like if I just make my hair big and put on all this makeup, I can get some attention, and maybe I'm not actually using it to attract a mate or to anything. I'm using it to make money, or I'm using it for my own personal goals, or I'm using it to soothe some trauma inside me from, 30 years ago. And I think men do the same thing. And well, I don't want to judge people too harshly, but it's immature, in my opinion. It's immature, and it's at the expense of people who, and especially kids who look up to that.
Mm-hmm.
It is immature, and I think because we haven't talked about the kind of the trauma aspect of it, like where does trauma come into it? Because we did understand a little bit about where that feeling, that posture was coming from when we talk about like Musk and Rogan and Trump, even, like this kind of there's a trauma behind it that causes them to be over exaggerated in their role of power hungry, or acting like, goofy teenager boys, just like, oh, it's all about looking at the women a certain way. I mean, that's what the whole conversation that Trump had in that bus, where he was, the bus is pulling up and he's talking about how he can, they let you do it if you're famous like I am, you can do that. And basically he's talking about sexually assaulting somebody. And that is interesting, because it's also what he was really doing was signaling to the man that was Billy Bush, who was in the bus with him, just like when, it's very interesting that I know I do this kind of subconsciously. I kind of recognize this, and I see this a lot with that show, the Real Housewives, where women will often signal to other women that, look how cute and sexy and pretty I can be, or look at this outfit that put together in a certain way. That and there's a sense of competition, I think, about it, and there's a sense of, I'm signaling to you that I'm an alpha female because I'm the one who's the most beautiful, attractive, have the biggest boobs, I have the capacity to get the most men, right? So all these things are happening under the surface, and we're not really paying attention. And I think a lot of the trauma for women comes in, and I know that, and we've talked a little bit about this, that there, you have the whole Me Too movement. When that Me Too movement came out, almost every single friend I have said that happened to me at some level. And that is, so there's a combination of fear about being sexy and feminine and all of that, because it gets it taken advantage of. It is a lower power structure compared to a man who, is the executive producer of a film studio, or your boss, or the guy that can beat you up once you have a relationship with them. And so how do we then find power in ourselves when we are playing the game? We're part of it. We are making judgments subconsciously about who's on top and who's not. and women are doing it too. Oh, she looks really cute and hot today. That's the one who's above me, right? In a very kind of primitive way. And we may not be consciously thinking it, but that's there, and or potentially there at least. And that's where I keep coming back to, again, the archetypes. How can we adopt an archetype that makes sense for us as we are based on our personality? So, so let me ask you this. Are there parts of you that you want to express that you don't feel are traditionally male?
I think I've gotten really comfortable with some of the more traditional, like some of my more traditional feminine qualities. I think I used to really struggle with it, but just being affectionate to my kids, or affectionate to my wife, but and just like a very like non like I guess with women, not having to be romantic or not having to be sexual. And I think kind of going from dating to kind of seriously dating to being married, that's really had to change, because when you're dating, it's more of, well, I am trying to be romantic. I am trying to pursue you. And at some extent, like, I am trying to, have a sexual relationship with you. And then kind of taking that into marriage, where it's like, well, like, yes, all that, but like we've kind of checked off some boxes here. So now it's more like I have to be affectionate for, but not in pursuance of it's to have a kid, or not in pursuance of any sort of short-term gratification, but more so because that physical connection is needed, not so much in a romantic way all the time or a sexual way, but just to bond. And I think in the same way with having kids, and I think for women it might be, I don't know, but I know for my wife it was a lot easier to do that, with the kids, especially because you give birth to them, they're in you for 9 months, you breastfeed them and all that. And for me it was, okay, well, I'm holding this baby, and it was my first time dad. I don't think I had ever held a kid, changed a diaper, or anything
Mm.
before my son. And so I didn't exactly know how to do that. And to be able to kind of slow down and to hug him and do skin to skin and to play. And I think where I had the most trouble with that was like slowing down. Like, okay, I have to be productive. I have to be efficient. I have to work. I have to be doing something on the house. I have to be fixing something. And to be able to like hold a baby, and it's like you don't do anything but just hold the baby.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I was thinking, okay, what's the goal here? What's the goal? What do I do? Like, how do I get better at it? And that's just not the way. That's just not it. That's completely
Right.
just not how you do it. To me, I always thought that was kind of, well, I thought it was feminine, just to just slow down. There's no goal here but to connect. There's no goal here
Mhm.
but to bond. There's no goal here but to nurture. And that, I know it sounds funny saying it out loud, but that was really, really tough. And that is still probably one of the biggest things I have trouble with in terms of just kind of balancing my masculinity and femininity, knowing that my family needs that side of me. And that is not, whether it's by nature or nurture, that is not, well, currently that's not within my immediate nature. I really have to be conscious about just taking that time and slowing down. And then even when I do, it feels like there's always like this little stress in the back of my head, like, okay, but there's something in the house that needs to be fixed, and I should really send out a couple of emails. And so sometimes I find myself like spending time with my family, but then almost like in my mind, just still trying to check a box. Like I have to, okay, I'll spend this much time and that box is checked, or, I'll play this amount, or I'll be intimate this amount, and then that checks the box, and then I can
Mhm.
get back to being a man. And
Well, you're still doing it like in a male kind of way, I guess. But I mean, women do that too. I went out to brunch with my cousin and a friend of mine this weekend. My cousin was telling me about my her daughter being a nanny. And she was telling me about all the things that she did as a nanny and stuff like that. And when she got finished, I said, "That sounds so exhausting to me. That's like the worst job I could ever think of to have, because it is, there's a lot of that energy that goes into being a nurturer." And I think you get past that after a certain period of time. There was a period of time when all I wanted to do was hold a baby and and play with the baby and be with the baby. But also you reach a point where it's like, oh my God, we've talked about this, how it's like it's so boring too. But you're talking about nurturing, and nurturing is a very feminine trait, and also, deeply embedded in our kind of genetic orientation. From, caveman times, somebody had to be there to breastfeed and do all the things that a women would do. So there's a biological component. There's also the hormone oxytocin, which is they call it the love hormone. It's the hormone that releases when you hold your baby, or especially for women when they nurse a baby. But it can be released from, petting your cat. That's why people love their animals so much, because they release that kind of relaxing, I don't have anything to do in this moment but to share, bonding, to just share being together and being with each other.
Well, to go off of that, I can also see those differences in my kids. So we have a boy and a girl, and spending time with my son is more like we go, you said this before, it's like we go do something, we play, we fight, we throw a ball around. And there's times where he just wants to sit on the couch and watch his cartoon or something. And he wants me next to him. He doesn't exactly, like, sometimes he'll hug me or whatever, put his head on my chest, but like most of the time it's like we're sitting there to watch the TV, not exactly to connect. And like, I don't know, that's natural for me. It's like, okay, great, we can do that. Let's get some food or whatever. But my daughter, completely opposite. She wants to like make pretend food, and she wants to like bring it to me and have me eat it, and then I can't just go off and go do whatever I was doing. She's like, no, Dad, sit. Sit, let's have a meal. Or when we're watching TV, she wants to climb up, she wants to be close. And she can do that for hours. And like I love being able to have the opportunity to bond with her like that, but it's a completely different, it's like
it's
night
different
and day.
energy. Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing. We still have these genetic biological things, and some people don't. That's the thing. We have to kind of leave it open that there are some boys who want to be like your daughter, and they want to cook and bring stuff to you. If you look at older married couples that, they start out, and especially if you're looking at like, okay, they got married in the 50s or 60s or something, and the woman is, subservient to the man, especially back then, very much into those roles, the traditional roles. A woman stays home, she takes care of the house, she's a housewife, she takes care of the kids, she takes care of her man, she's there to give him the slippers and the pipe and the whole thing. And as time goes on, the woman starts to gain more power in the relationship. And if you look at a relationship, there tends to be a switch where when they're older, the woman is, in charge. Honey, this is what you're going to do, and this is what we're going to have. And they become more masculine. And there is a hormonal change that happens. So like, go talk to a grandfather and you tell them, they start, or they wouldn't have done that when they were 25 or 30 or something. And women become more, like strict, and no, this is not what's going to happen. We're going to do it like this, and this. And you can track it, like go watch a movie or a TV show, and you'll see that kind of dynamic happens. So it just shows that even in a lifetime, we can switch our gender kind of roles. And you were talking about some of the female characteristics. I think I've always had a little bit of more male characteristics. I've always been more independent. I want to do things on my own. And then even when I was engaged to be married, it was like, well, we'll be married, but I'm going to have my own bedroom. That was my big thing. Like, I want to have my own room, my own space and stuff like that. And then I went through a period of time, and because I never got married, where I was really worried that maybe I would be seen as too masculine, and that maybe people would think that I was gay. And I didn't want anyone to think I was gay. And then I thought, well, who cares if they think I'm gay? Like, I'm not, but I don't care, right? Or I shouldn't care. But it bothers us anyway, because we're in these roles that are just there in society. So how do we break free, I think, is the question that I think would be really helpful, especially for kids nowadays who are doing it themselves. I mean, they're breaking free themselves. they aren't really tied to a lot of gender roles. And many of them actively reject gender roles. And that bothers a lot of people. But shouldn't that be an okay question to ask? But because there is such a social, like, there's like a door that slams socially for a lot of people in their religious upbringing and their traditional upbringing, that if you are straight and you don't even question it, because it's such a dangerous, road to go down. And I think that's really harmful for us, because we should be able to say, there are parts of me that are more masculine and there are parts of me that are feminine. But that doesn't then mean that I automatically fit into some role where I'm gay or I'm going to be trans or whatever, that I'm just expressing my own unique personality that gathers a little bit here and a little bit there from different, different gender roles. What's wrong with that? Why is that so dangerous for people?
Danger for me, at least, is, and I want to say danger that you'll probably have to face whether you want to do it, when you're, 15, or you want to do it when you're, 60, you'll still probably have to do it at some point. If you don't know, like, if you don't know yourself, like, yeah, maybe you can get away with that just within your life. But if you ever do have a relationship, if you ever do commit to something where you have to deal with other people for a long period of time, it's going to be very difficult to deal with them if you don't know how to deal with yourself, especially if you run into someone who has also not asked those questions, and they don't know themselves. I think it puts young people in particular, I think older people, and I might kind of just be on the cusp of a generation. I think maybe because, I was raised by my parents who were kind of traditional, where, like, I'm still very traditional. I think when I was young, I didn't, it was like, whatever, gender roles, whatever. I think as I've gotten a little bit older, and things have gotten more stressful for me. It's a lot easier to kind of go back to what I know.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife kind of always jokes about me, saying I'm kind of like an old man, but well, that's kind of what I am. Like, when I'll be honest about that, when things get stressful or I don't know what to do, that is not the time for me to kind of dive into all the possibilities. It's like, okay, this is kind of what I know. This is kind of what I'm good at. I'm going to double down on this, because if I don't, whatever might happen. But for young people, there was a point where I had to ask myself, okay, like, do I like men? And it wasn't even because I was super attracted to men or anything, but it was like, okay, well, it was more like, how much do I like women? Because I had a string of relationships that were just difficult emotionally. And I was like, well, all my male friendships are just so much easier. And so would I maybe like to be in a relationship that's just easier like that? Like, can I just have that? And the answer for me was no, because I just wasn't sexually attracted to men, and I just couldn't think of that. But I was like, well, okay, okay, at least I know that. I know why, and I know the boundaries, and I know why that is. But I think if I didn't know that, it would just keep popping up until I figured it out. Because even in my relationship, whether it's, sexual attraction or, something of that nature, even in my relationship, sometimes there's been times where I don't want to be too soft because she might think I'm gay. And it's like, well, why would she think you're gay? Like, you're married to her. And I know that's such a horrible thought, but I think a lot of, well, it kind of, maybe on both sides, men and women have this thought. Or maybe if I'm too masculine, she won't like me. Or if I'm too feminine, she won't like me anymore. Or he won't like me anymore. And I think it kind of goes back to the solution being, well, there's a unique solution for you. You're somewhere specific on the spectrum, whatever spectrum that is. And so is your partner. And if you're not able to communicate that, then it's just not going to work. Not because you're gay or you're straight or because you're masculine or feminine, but just because you haven't been able to figure where you are and where your partner is in a way that where you're able to figure out how to move forward together, given your differences.
You're talking about authentic. We always come back to this. It's the difference between authentic power is when you're authentically powerful, you allow yourself to ask yourself those questions. You allow yourself to then pull back and say, well, is that really what I want, or is that not really what I want? And then also reflect that back to your partner or to your friend or whatever. That's where you get a realness about you that becomes powerful. You're not adopting it from someplace else. And I think the way that I see it is that look at this, going back to the Blue Origin thing. Who is the people that everyone's talking about are not the actual scientists whose trip to on Blue Origin has a scientific use for being up there, and she's overshadowed because she has authentic power, because she knows who she is. She loves science. She's been doing it for a long time, and she got overshadowed by what the society gives power to, which is the women with the big lips and the big tits. And that is what's wrong. And that's what we have to be constantly allowing kids to feel their power and not buy into that fake power, that fake vision of power, whether it's I got the biggest muscles and I'm the toughest guy, standing in front of the El Salvador prisons going like this, which is just grotesque to me, or the woman who is Botox to the hilt and has the Birkin bag and gets all the power. We just have to be aware of that. And I think young people are, but I think they need more people telling them it's okay to not follow that, because you also have, Katy Perry probably has a cajillion followers who are, not aware that they can choose not to be like her and instead see her as the icon to follow. And I just keep coming back to this. The bounce back generation has to be all about you create your own icon and you follow that icon. You do not go and borrow somebody else's icon. Katy Perry can be Katy Perry. I'm not saying that she has to change. She gets to be who she is. But do we have to give her all the power and tell the little girls that go follow and be like her, instead of giving little girls and boys too the power to be themselves? And the boy can be the boy that carries, loves growing and picking and arranging flowers. And the girl can be the one who wants to get the Lego set or the erector set and make, be an engineer. And we have to do more of that, because we're raising kids then that don't know who they are, don't know what their power is. And it's super unfair to them.
Just see, kind of like you take a kid to the store and they just, they see the shiniest toy and that's the one that they want because it's the one that sticks out. Mm. And, you see Katy Perry on a rocket ship and you're like, oh, wow, like I love her music and I want to be on a rocket. Like if you're a 9-year-old girl or a 10-year-old girl, like you're not going to see the marketing. You're not going to see the marketing campaign behind it. Right. You're just going to see, in a way, you spend however much money, millions of dollars, get your album list up there and like you're on a rocket ship and a lot of little girls and maybe some little boys too. Like, that's going to be pretty cool. Yeah. But I do think the older you get, you realize, okay, like that's just marketing. Do I like the music or not? Yes, no. Okay, next. And I would maybe say that the scientist that went up there, like the educator, she went up there for her reasons too. It just wasn't to market her album. And no, she's probably not going to get a million little girls to come, support her work or go, think she's, the bee's knees. But for the small group of people that did notice that and who do know who she is and the people in her audience will probably think that's really cool. And I think what, maybe a silver lining here is that at least she was on the rocket ship. She had the opportunity to do that. I won't say she had the opportunity. She made the opportunity for herself to do that and will inspire a small group of people that they can do the same thing if they want. You don't have to follow Katy Perry. One of the silver linings in social media, in today's media, is that there's the opportunity for more people to come through. Whereas before, it's like there's a couple of channels on TV, and if you're not on one of those channels, you're not getting seen. But today, there's a million channels, and that's a negative. But I think it's also a positive. I don't think we're anywhere close to getting that right now. I think the people who already had platforms are probably milking it and exploiting it. But there is a small gap, and I think there is a small opportunity for people who do interesting things and can set actual good examples for kids to kind of come through if they choose to do it.
When you were talking about social media and how there's lots of examples out there that kids can find. And there's a tarot card, it's the 7 of Cups, and it's a man. The picture on the tarot card is a man standing in front of 7 cups, and each one of the cups has different things in it. Like one of them has like jewels overflowing, and it really represents that that the world can offer us a lot of options, and we have to be wise enough to choose which ones we want. And if you're doing a reading and that comes up, it's really about what is it? Do you have a lot of options in front of you right now? So let's say like you came to me and said, do a tarot card reading about what's what should I do for my career? It'd be like, well, one of it would be like, you've got a lot of options in front of you. Now you've got to sit back and figure out which one is the right one. It's not going to pop out in front of you. It's going to be, you having to reflect back to yourself and ask yourself, who am I? What is it that I really truly want? And I think that's the tools that we want to give kids. If you're going to give them, the whole spectrum of humanity on social media, you've got to also give them the tools to say, I'm either too young and don't know myself well enough to choose one avenue, which is what the whole trans argument is, which makes sense, if you're young, blah, 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 but it's a little more complicated. But, or religion, that you're brought up in a religion and you've got to stick with that religion. All of those kinds of things that get imposed on kids, and really give them more of a sense of, how do I choose? How do I make those choices for myself when I'm ready? When am I going to be ready? And kids are often not ready until they, your brain continues growing into your 20s. So how do you make choices and try things out without getting into trouble, without hurting yourself, long term?
Tools and the how rather than the what, and the archetypes rather than the specific role model or the specific person, to me, seem infinitely more valuable, because if you know how you can use them, then you can use them forever. And you don't have to be 10 years old to make a decision for the rest of your life, or 20 or 30 or 40. And I guess because, thinking of the seven cups, it feels like, every month that opportunity pops up. It's like every month, every couple of weeks, there's like, okay, well, what do you want now? What do you want now? What do you want now? And it's for me, like, over time, it's kind of ended up being kind of roughly the same amount of things, but I still have to make that choice. And the more tools I have, the easier and faster I'm able to make those decisions and kind of stay on track, rather than get distracted or lose integrity, or just kind of psych myself out and thinking, oh, I'll never make it, or I'll never reach this, when really I have to decide what that goal is. I have to decide who I want to be, and then having the tools to kind of help me focus on that and then continue to walk that path has been more helpful than saying, look at, Katy Perry on the rocket ship, and that's what I want to be, when I'm not Katy Perry, or, I'm not,
Right.
I'm not Trump. Not that I would want to be Trump, but like, I'm not this person. And the way that I do that, or way that they did that, even if that's something that I want, isn't the way that I'm going to be able to do that.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, it's kind of just entertainment. It's like, wow, look that's nice. That's funny. That's cool and great. Like, I can appreciate it for that. But when it comes to any sort of serious decision making, I don't think that should really be in the equation.
Well, the interesting thing is, what we've done is we've taken Katy Perry and the blue origin story and turned it into an archetypal story. Be careful. Be careful about giving up your power to be careful for the women who went up there and thought that they were going to be applauded. You are the example of feminine power, have gotten totally dissed for it. I mean, they are underwater in the way that people have responded to it. One, because of the massive amounts of wealth that they are displaying, that they can spend, millions of dollars to go 11 minutes up. But also because people sense that this display of, quote unquote, feminine power is really not authentic. It is a grotesque caricature of what it means to be a woman, a powerful woman. That is really at the base of what's going on. So we have with famous people, what happened, and I think that's why they call them iconic, icons, is they turn into archetypes for us that we can then reflect ourselves off of and understand ourselves a little bit better. Would you want to be that person? And if not, why? Or if you do, why? And I think a lot of women, I know the women are the ones who are making fun the most of this thing. A lot of women are saying, this is not who I want to be like. I want to be like a real scientist. And I don't want to be wearing a $350,000 watch and going up to space for 11 minutes when the country is going through what it's going through, when the world is going through, when there are people, when you could be using that money to actually save people, you know. One quick anecdote too is Melinda French Gates, who is Bill Gates' ex-wife, just wrote a book, and I was listening to an interview that she did about, you know, her life. And, you know, the inevitably the questions come back to Bill Gates and what's he like and things like that. And so she's very good at kind of dodging that and saying, this is a book about me and about the things that I've done. And she said that her kind of big projects that she pursues with the millions of dollars that she's giving away. She has this agreement that several Warren Buffett and Bill Gates has this too. A lot of these billionaires have this agreement that they're going to give away at least half of their money before they die. And so she has been giving money to contraceptive care around the world, because she says that that's how you have power as a woman, is when you can decide whether you want to have children or not, or how you space your children. And so she, you know, has done all this research, a lot of work on it. And she said that she would go to these big panels and meetings with, you know, prime minister of this country and talk about this stuff. And if Bill Gates was with her, they would inevitably turn to him and ask him about women's reproductive rights stuff that she was working on. And so that's part of the struggle for, you know, this kind of real iconic power. And if she would have been, you know, dressed differently or had, you know, glammed up, or, you know, I don't know, what could she have done to just gotten the attention to her as the actual author and proponent of this work that she has been doing for many, many years. So it's a dilemma.
You know, some of the world leaders might have looked at Bill Gates instead of Melinda Gates. She was still there. Mm-hmm. And I think people that are actually mission driven and who are actually going for impact rather than attention, they're around, which mm-hmm. is great. And it's just that their goal is not attention, which means I think if you're someone who is trying to find decent role models, or you're trying to figure out what you want to do, your examples, the people who are doing these things, are mission driven, doing great things, your examples are kind of giving you some answers here. They're saying it's not about the attention, because as soon as they start going for the attention, you realize, okay, like that's not what they're going for. Mm-hmm. But you can see these people getting attention. It might not be a whole bunch, but for the things that they're actually doing and for the impact that they're actually having, which is also a signal. Like if you're in the media business, or you're in music, or you're on TV, and you're getting millions and millions and millions of views or attention, like, well, you should. That's your business. That's what you're there for. And I think that might be also, you know, something people should look at. Now, you can't expect a kid to really look at that, because that's a little bit more advanced to kind of see through that. But I think for the average adult, you can kind of understand, well, that is their business. They're an entertainer, so they're here to entertain. They're here to get eyeballs.
Right. Well, that's the thing. It's not that it's wrong for Katy Perry to be Katy Perry. She is Katy Perry. That is her. I'm assuming that's her authentic self. You know, I'm not saying that she should change. I'm just saying that we as a society need to, we look at her as an icon, and either she's an icon we want to follow, or she's an icon we don't want to follow. And I think having this analysis, having the ability as to the public viewing, whether it's a social media piece or it's the news or whatever, and being able to just discern, do I want to be like that, is what's going on. Thanks for listening. We hope you'll subscribe for weekly podcasts about building personal strength, mental resilience, and emotional balance. You can also find free tools, resources, and quizzes at bbgtv.org. That's bbgtv.org.